Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of So You're Ready to Date. Today, we want you to pull those boxing gloves out of the closet and we're going to take them to the gym and give them a workout. And we're going to talk about how to fight fair with your significant other because we all know that disagreements can happen. It's inevitable. We are not the same people. We do not have the same lived experiences. There are different landmines in our past that we may unknowingly step on. So, a lot of different things can create conflict in relationships. And one characteristic of a healthy relationship is the way that we fight and argue with each other or disagree, not even fight, but disagree with each other. And so, we want the boxing gloves to be used in the gym and not in the household. So let's kind of dive in and talk about what that looks like and how maybe we can clean up the way that we disagree and express that with our partners to make it a safer environment for everybody, like we talked about last week.
I think there's this idea that perfect relationships maybe don't have these hiccups, and the amount or not amount that you're arguing or disagreeing or fighting with your significant other somehow is like a rating of your relationship. And I think that when we say fight, it has this very like, for a lot of people, maybe a visceral reaction of like, we're butting heads, we're angry, we're raised voices. But it can be something as simple as like a disagreement about where you want to go on vacation. So maybe reframing the language of, it's, you're going to have disagreements, you're going to have differences of opinion with your significant other, but how are you having these conversations? Because these are not conversations that we can ignore. These are not conversations that we should be ignoring. It's how can we have productive conversations so that when the inevitable comes up, because you're two different people with very probably entrenched firm beliefs in what you believe in, how can you start to have these conversations so that there's either a compromise or somebody agrees to go this way this time and you'll agree to go the other person's way the next time, but having these conversations so that the outcome is productive and not name calling and hurt feelings and the silent treatment for weeks at a time, however that looks.
Right. And, all of those things are things that have come with me. When I was growing up, the silent treatment was very common in my family. And when I was in my relationships, the people pleaser in me wanted to sweep things under the rug and not have those conversations. And it's not that whether your relationship looks like roses and sunshine on the outside, if you're not getting to express who you are and what you're feeling and being able to talk about those things that don't align with exactly what you want, which, let's be honest, if we're all human and we're living under the same roof, things are not going to align. You might load the dishwasher one way and that's really a boundary, or somebody might decide that they're going to go do something when you have plans and so you're stuck at home with the kids. Or it may be as simple as holidays and where you're going for the holidays and whose family you're going to spend the holidays with, whether or not there's travel plans involved and distances. So there are lots of different ways that those disagreements can show up in your relationship. And I think that setting those boundaries and being able to have that safe space to have those communications is super important in establishing a healthy relationship. And I don't think that the amount of disagreements or conflicts that you have and that you overcome is a characteristic, like you said, of a solid relationship. Just because you only have them once in a while and not every day, I think it comes down to, my belief is that it comes down to more how you work through them and how you communicate with each other and how both parties feel after that disagreement is resolved.
Well, and you had mentioned something about the people pleaser aspect. And some of it is like, are you discounting and tamping down your needs and wants in the relationship so as not to have this difficult conversation with your partner about maybe what you need, what your boundary is? And the idea that, why can't you have good conversation? Maybe this is not a disagreement. Maybe this is just a conversation that you're having with your partner. And putting this negative spin on it, like it's a fight, it's a disagreement. Yes, it can be some of those things, but maybe it's just conversation with your better half about learning to speak up and say, hey, this is kind of what I need in this relationship. And if that's leading to like somebody fighting about it, then I think maybe it's time to like reevaluate where you are, because I think sometimes that's where some disagreements can come from if somebody's always getting their way and you feel like your needs aren't being met. Because I know I've done this in past relationships where you tamp it down and you tamp it down until all of a sudden, we talked about it in one of the other episodes this season, where it explodes. And we're not only arguing about the fact that you put the toilet paper on wrong, we're arguing about everything in the last year that has annoyed me, that has pissed me off, that I've been holding on to because I wasn't going to be that wife, that girlfriend, that partner that was going to talk about this. Nope, we're just going to sweep everything to this point where it can't help but come out. And how can we have these conversations on a more timely basis before we get the like word vomit of everything?
Right. The image in my head is the Rolodex coming with the cards flying in every direction. And so I think that brings us to the first point, the first tip on things that we can really do to help ease the conflict in the relationship. And it's when there is something to discuss, it is one thing. So keep it to whatever is you are upset about right now. If you're starting out with, I don't want to go there for dinner, and you always pick and you never let me pick, then suddenly it turns into a fight about money, and suddenly it turns into a fight about child raising, and suddenly it turns in, and we're talking about maybe some new relationships, so it turns into a fight about your family, and it turns into a fight about your job and the people that you spend your time with and your friends, or whatever that disagreement turns into. It can go a million different ways. So reeling it back in and focusing on what the issue at hand is, one thing. If all of these other things are issues, then it might be time to take a step back and address those, write those all out so that you don't forget about them, and have them one conversation at a time. And you said something about not wanting to have those difficult conversations, right? How do you start it? How do you bring it up? Oh, I don't want to have a knockdown, drag it out fight type thing. So I just kind of push it aside and push my needs and wants aside. Boundaries are number one, setting firm boundaries for yourself and honoring yourself. But I just want to remind everybody, there's a book out there, Difficult Conversations, and there was a study that was done in there. And the most difficult part of a conversation is the first 8 seconds. So ask yourself, can you do it for 8 seconds? If you could do it for 8 seconds, the rest of it, once it's out there, the rest of it isn't nearly as difficult as that first 8 seconds was.
Yes, that is getting that ball rolling that you're like, okay, I gotta just start this conversation. And you mentioned something like writing it down. If you guys have this habit, if you as a couple have a habit of going off topic, then maybe it's time to have like a dry whiteboard that you just like, okay, this is what we're discussing. And when you start to find us kind of going off topic or on that tangent, somebody drawing back, no, we're talking about the way that you unload the groceries or whatever the discussion is about, but having something that draws you back to the topic at hand. I'm not opposed to like, why can't we put a timer saying we're going to talk about this for 10 minutes? You get 5 minutes, I get 5 minutes. Finding those ways that you can have maybe some boundaries around, we're discussing this. If after 10 minutes we can't get this figured out, then okay, we're going to take a break, cool down, catch our breath, come back and talk about this. Nobody says that you have to always fix it just in that moment. I know, Angie, I think you said in the past that you like to solve it right away. I'm one of those that sometimes I just need some space to let my brain and body kind of process this. So maybe finding ways that both of you can have those needs met by, all right, we'll talk about it right now. And then if we can't really come to an agreement, let's go to our separate corners, give ourselves a break, and then come back to discuss this topic, maybe with a fresh set of eyes, calmed down a little bit in a space to continue having these difficult conversations.
You talk about something that's really interesting, because yes, I am right now, instant gratification. If I am upset, the words need to come out of my mouth. And if I am frustrated with something, the words need to come out of my mouth. However, that is not always the best spot for me to be in. And it has taken me a long time to learn to maybe step back from that. But on the other hand, my current partner is very much I need to step back. I need to step away from you. Maybe all the words are going to come out of my mouth, but they are not going to come out of my mouth where you can hear them, because I need my chance to cool off. And this is how I get things out. And then we're going to come back together and talk and use words that I actually mean instead of words that come out of my mouth when I'm upset. So I've had to adjust to that a little bit because that's different for me, but it has helped our relationship because then we say what we actually mean. And one of the things that helped, if you are that type and your partner is the other type, like in our relationship, or vice versa, one of the things that helped was talking about when both parties are calm and a fight or disagreement is not on the table, saying, okay, we need to talk about this because this method that we're doing isn't working for either of us. How long can I expect? How much time do you need before I can come talk to you about it? Because I need to get it off my chest, and that's going to meet both of our needs. Because I can set a timer and wait an hour. I can even set an alarm clock and wait a day, although we have talked about the fact that I don't like to go to bed angry. So it's more likely to set an alarm clock and talk about it in an hour. But I can do that. I can give you time to decompress. I can give you time to gather your thoughts and come back around. And so that's a very beneficial conversation to have, just so that you can get on the same page with what is going to be the most productive in a conversation going forward to resolve disagreements.
Well, I think you said something too, where it's like calming down enough so that we say what we actually mean and maybe not what we're thinking in the heat of the moment, so that our conversation and our words are respectful to our partner and don't devolve into name calling or picking on them in whatever way feels like I'm going to get that dig right now because I just want to hurt you because I'm feeling hurt for whatever reason that might be. And usually that seems to be what triggers some sort of conflict, is that somebody feels like they got hurt or weren't listened to or disrespected. So that time away to be like, I need to gather my thoughts because I really don't want to say something that I can't take back. I think that's the biggest part, is you say something, you're like, I can't unsay that I called you all of these things. And it's harder to rebuild that trust again when you've gotten to that space of, she just called me this.
Yeah. And I think I remember back, I don't know where I heard it. I don't know what it came from, but it came from somewhere. And it was a light bulb moment that hurt people hurt people. It takes a very self-aware person to realize that you're feeling hurt, misunderstood, whatever that is, and not want to go take that out on the person that hurt you. And so that statement really resonated with me. And I think of that in relationships that are falling apart, right? At some point in time, you did love this other person. You liked them enough to get into a relationship with them. If you're going through a divorce, you love them enough to marry them, and suddenly it has deteriorated so far that you're no longer feeling that. And that's where those ugly divorces come from, because hurt people hurt people. And so we want to hurt the people that hurt us. So taking a step back, taking a deep breath, calming down, really digging into what you're feeling and letting the issue at hand be the focus of the conversation is sometimes powerfully helpful.
Well, and I think there's nothing to say that you can't table this discussion and bring in a professional. I mean, we haven't talked much about this, but I was watching something, it must have been on Instagram, where a couple had a therapist. And if there are topics where they kind of feel like they've reached this point, they can't solve it themselves, it gets written down in their notebook. And then the next time they have therapy, they're like, all right, I don't need you to solve this problem, but we just have come to this impasse on how we can solve this. So helping us working on those tools and tricks and tips to make you better at fighting and arguing and discussing. Sometimes a professional helps. Sometimes you need that neutral third party if you're finding that your conversations just can't ever come to some sort of agreement. Maybe there are something new that you can learn to be able to talk in a more effective and efficient way with your partner.
I love that, talking about a neutral third party, because one of the things, there's sometimes a lot of stigma around that. But we go to the doctor for a yearly checkup. We go to the doctor to make sure that we're healthy, even when we don't feel like there's anything wrong with us, right? You want to go make sure that everything is working, a safe space to get some stuff out. So going and talking to a neutral third party is a great way to work through some of those, and having, whether it's once a month, once a quarter, whatever, once every couple of weeks, depending on where you're at, if that works for your relationship, there is nothing wrong with that, and can be a great place to talk through some of those hot topics that might cause trigger or disagreements in your relationship.
I would say, especially if you feel like you have that issue with getting the conversation started, maybe, having that other person to be like, all right, how can we broach these subjects if you're having that panic or fear of like, I can't even get the first words out. All right, using a like that neutral third party to at least get the ball rolling so that you can start practicing in a safe space where you know that hopefully everybody knows that this is a safe space where we can talk about these things and be respectful at the same time.
Yes. Yes, all of that. I think that's great advice, great thought that does not seem to be appropriately put out there as an opportunity or a solution to kind of work through some of this. So I like that. But if you are not the person that is ready to take that step, because sometimes that can be a little daunting too, to even have that conversation with your partner that you want to go do that, because maybe that's just not where you're at in your relationship yet. So just a couple of things to help you with these conversations when you have them. Like we already talked about, staying on topic, but the next would be always and never. Those are trigger words, right? If we use those, we are really setting a precedent, and those are words that you would want to avoid in your conversation, because a person doesn't always do something, or it's unlikely that they never do something. It might not be habit, it might not be something that they typically do, but always and never also kind of indicate a lack of willingness to change or try and do some of that kind of stuff. So those tend to be trigger words that you would want to avoid in an argument.
I feel like those are the type of words that automatically your brain just is like, nope, done, checking out, because apparently I can't do anything, right? So I'm not going to continue to have this conversation. And that's where, it feels like everything starts to go off the rails, right? Where you're like, okay, she always thinks I do this. He always thinks I do that. It feels like it's never productive. It never like moves the conversation forward. It just kind of gets you stuck in this like playground of like name calling and throwing things back and forth, and we don't ever actually talk about it because we're just trying to find the next thing that I can hurl at you.
Yes, yes. So I think that those are just really words to avoid in any conversation where you're talking about actions of another person, because always is a long time and never is a long time. And my dad says that to me all the time, because I say, oh, I would never do that. And he always, every time he hears it, that's a trigger for him. And he says, never is a long time. And I think that's something that's important to remember, because things that I am doing today, my 21-year-old self would have said, I'll never do that.
Right.
And my 21-year-old self was very wrong.
Oof, if we had to like stay to the course that our 21-year-old selves had picked, my gosh, right?
Oh, thank goodness I am who I am today. I thank her. She was a great person, and I wouldn't be who I am without her, but I'm glad that I am not that person any longer.
Well, if we're talking about always and never, we kind of need to add in that aspect of that feeling language of I, because really only thing you have control over is how you react to this situation, how you feel in the situation. So, talking about how whatever action made you feel, how I am interpreting this, maybe. Because I think sometimes that can be just as easily, I feel like you're doing this, or it sounds like you're a good one at saying this to me, Angie. Or it sounds like you're saying.
What I hear you saying is, yes, I think I statements are super important in having a conversation about something that's difficult, right? Because it is unlikely that our significant other did something with an intention of hurting us, of upsetting us, of doing harm to us or our relationship. So the thing is, this happened and I feel, not you did this and made me feel, not you made me, but this happened and I feel. And putting that out there in such a way to have a conversation as to not attack your significant other in any way, shape, or form, but to tell them, okay, here's what I saw happen. Not you did it, but here's what I saw happen. And here is the result and how I feel about that. And letting them respond to it. And because chances are they didn't even know that you felt that way because your experience in life is different than theirs. And they could actually be think they're helping. For example, you say something about wanting to stop eating sugar. Guilty right here. Say something about wanting to stop eating sugar, and then you are having a bad day and go for that ice cream sundae, and your significant other says, do you really want to eat that? And I could hear all kinds of stuff in that, right? But what his intention is to remind me that I said I want to stop eating sugar. So this happened. I had an ice cream sundae. You said this. I felt this. Not you did this and it made me feel, because I feel the way that I feel based on my past experiences, not because of anything that he did.
I think a key part of this as well, are you listening to hear what your partner is saying, or are you listening to try to respond and defend yourself? Because I think that's a hard part in any conversation, is not listening to see how I can respond, but listening to hear what your partner is really trying to tell you. Because I get it. We all have that moment of, well, you feel momentarily attacked and your defenses go up, and sometimes my ears shut off and my face goes bright red and I just kind of start to tune out because of like, I I'm a bad person. They don't love me anymore. They don't like me anymore. What's going on? And so taking a moment being like, hopefully you can have conversations where like, this is not about an attack. This is, I just need to talk to you about this. So listening to hear what each other is saying. If you need to say like, hey, I'm going to need a minute to kind of think about this before I respond, and then having that response come out, but really trying to listen to what you're saying to each other so that something is not lost in translation, lost in interpretation of whatever you're trying to talk about.
I love that. And one of the ways that you can make sure that you are being the partner that is leading by example in that is to ask questions. Instead of jumping on and responding to what they say, ask questions to clarify, ask questions to make sure that you understood that correctly. Again, going back to what I hear you saying is, and let them confirm that what you're saying is what they were saying and that you heard it correctly so that you can understand and address the problem rather than defend yourself.
Well, not that the guy I'm dating and I have had an argument yet, but English is not his first language. So they're like, even when we're having like nice conversations, there are times I'm like, can you say that again? Because what you said and what I heard, I'm not sure I understand where this needs to go. So it's always clarifying is not a bad thing. Asking them to be like, I'm not quite understanding what you're trying to get across to me. I want to make sure I clearly understand what is upsetting you. So asking like, yeah, you said those good questions to be like, I just need a little bit more here. I'm not saying that it's not valid, but it's not quite clicking in my brain here. So can you help me out and provide a little bit more?
And oftentimes, when somebody feels heard, even if there isn't a resolution, but they actually feel heard, it can de escalate a situation and bring it back down to, oh, this is really a non issue because you do understand where I'm coming from, or you are hearing where I'm coming from. So you are taking that into account. And now I can see it and it's no longer an issue.
It reminds me, for everybody who's seen Ted Lasso, there's this scene in the second season where Roy has this problem and they all come together as the Diamond Dogs and they talk about it. And at the end, they don't really come to any resolution. And he's like, oh, so sometimes you just get together and you talk about it and there's no real resolution. Yeah. Uh-huh. Okay, that's kind of cool. So sometimes it doesn't necessarily have to have a quick fix or an actual answer. But like you said, just sometimes being able to get it out there and discuss it and know that your partner has seen and heard you can be enough to be like, all right, now it's on my radar. I know not to do this next time. Doesn't have to have like an actual concrete resolution.
Yes, I think that is also something great to keep in mind. And I just want to put it out there that we want to see and hear all of you. So go ahead and drop us a line. Let us know what you thought of this episode and these tips and tricks on how to keep it clean and fight fair. And let us know what other topics you would like to hear from us. We'd love to bring you whatever it is that you are looking for to help you improve your dating and love life. We are at so you're ready to date at gmail.com, and we will see you next week.